Do I have to do this? Like, seriously, do I have to do this? This doesn't even count as part of the main series, so why am I even talking about it? Oh, wait, John K is involved in this, and I promised I would do it in the Season 1 video, so, yep, here it is, I guess. So, for those not in the know, in 2003, Spike TV contacted John K in order to make a Ren and Stimpy reboot for adults, and thus, we have Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon. So I guess I have 6 more Ren and Stimpy episodes to talk about. Lucky me. Anyways, let's just get this over with. And we start off this series with Onward and Upward. Bad. It's just bad. It tries way too hard to be gross. It is no longer gross and it's just boring. Also, this episode confirms that Ren and Stimpy are gay, even though it was technically confirmed in the Son of Stimpy back in Season 2, but whatever. Moving on. Now let's move on to a Phantom Strider called the worst cartoon episode of all time, Ren Seeks Help. And this is honestly the best episode of Adult Party Cartoon. It's still not a good episode at all, but it's a masterpiece when compared to the rest of the show. I will admit the animation is pretty decent and it can be very shocking at times. Now let's move on to Fire Dogs 2. This episode is just a disgrace to the original episode because even though it's called Fire Dogs 2, it has little to nothing to do with the original Fire Dogs. Although I will admit I did enjoy Ralph Bakshi's performance in this episode. Now let's move on to Naked Beach Frenzy, oh boy. This is not only the worst episode of Adult Party Cartoon, but I'm just gonna say it, this is the worst episode of the entirety of Ren and Stimpy. The story is awful, the characterization is bad, not a single joke got a laugh out of me, and worst of all, it's just uncomfortable to watch not knowing what John K did to his female animators. Just screw this episode back to hell! Now let's move on to Altruist. This is the only episode of Adult Party Cartoon that was created solely for Adult Party Cartoon, meaning that Naked Beach Frenzy was considered for the original series. Moving on! I hate this episode. Barely any jokes got a laugh out of me, the characterization is bad, and despite being 40 minutes, the story of this episode barely has enough content to be 11 minutes. This episode also has the infamous sawing scene. You know, the scene that every idiot on Twitter mistakes for a clip from the original show and thinks, this aired on Nickelodeon? Even though it's clearly not from the original show. And finally, to end this series, we've got Stimpy's Pregnant. This episode has the same problems as Onward and Upward, where it tries way too hard to be gross and it comes off less gross and more boring. Moving on. So, to absolutely nobody's surprise, Adult Party Cartoon is awful, and in my opinion, this is one of many examples as to why John K just cannot make a good product if he has full creative control. But at least, I am finally done watching every episode of Ren and Stimpy so I can finally get to the top 5 best and worst episodes. So, I'll see you there while I just get some rest.